You're tuned in to Altered Geek.
Hello and welcome to Altered Geek. I'm your host, Steve, Megatron the producer, Phillips. Yes, it's convoluted, but I don't care. And joining me in this week's episode is Alex.
Hello. I was actually going to say Alex Megatron Phillips, but then that doesn't work now that you said you're
That just sounds weird if you throw in my last name, though.
Yeah, but then, I don't know, it's going to make people question things like, are we related? Am I a crazy stalker fan? Did I forget my own last name? Something like that.
All of the above? I don't know.
Sure, why
not? So, as some may have been wondering what we were talking talking about podcasts and the whole social networking aspect of it, and kind of trying to create the whole networks, and because there's a multitude of different things that have been kind of popping up over the last several months, if anything, trying to garner attention, whether it's professional critics with user-generated podcast reviews or things like Podchaser, which is it's basically a podcast social feed that allows users to register and have like a personalized timeline with like real-time guest appearances and reviews and releases and everything else. So basically what that allows you to do is you pull up your profile on Podchaser. So for instance, mine has, a brief about, and then it says appearances, and it shows like every show you're associated with. Now, granted, you have to add them, and then they vet them afterward.
Okay.
But you do this, and then it says, you mark whether you're the host, whether you're the producer, you're the editor, you're the voice actor, whatever. And then you tag the episodes of the whole series or however it breaks down. And then they add it to your appearances log, or if you've guested on somebody's podcast, and then it gives you their total podcast show count, and then like an episode count of how many episodes they've been on, and then like total airtime that they've been breathing air on podcasts. And although mine's not 100% accurate, because there's a lot of shows I just was like, I'm not adding these because it's take too much time to go back. It says my episode count is 1,205.
Well, yeah, it's like 1,400 for Mike, for Birdman. So it's like, there's no way.
Yeah,
like,
and so
going back that far.
Yeah, and it says like I've been in like 30, associated with 3,539 podcasts or something, which is, I think, somewhat counts like the producer and the host and the voice acting role for the same shows. Like, so you get almost like a double, triple. So, but
I'll have to check it out. See, because I know doing crossovers and then doing Twig for what have I been doing now? Probably 2.5 years, nearly three years probably now. You add all that up, and I'm on an average of 1.5 to 2 hours per week, probably, if you added up my times. Maybe sometimes more than that, but it doesn't feel like much until you start looking at like, wow, I've done like 200 episodes already.
Yeah, it was crazy when we did like the basically, podcasting, this is your life, or the history of the GCRN. And Kevin went through this. He went through this massive document that he created. And it essentially was, and I'm trying to see if I can find it, although I'm probably not going to be able to on the air. But anyways, he crafted this giant network stats type of thing of the history, the master list. Here it is, of the network, and he, through tedious work, went through every show and checked all of the descriptions to see what hosts were on what program.
Oh wow!
And like when that show ran, and how many podcasts they had under their belt at that particular point in time. It's sadly been neglected by Mike and myself because life happens. But he's also listed like interviews, all the individual shows, and then and tag them in there. And there were shows that were missing because I purged them when we were trying to create space on the web server when we were hosting our own stuff. But he even went as far as to like any guests or any guest hosts or co-hosts that were even minutely associated with the network. He put, their names in, and the long list of everything. It's just crazy. But anyways, it came to a total at this particular point in time when we recorded this, and I want to say it was last year. Mike had 2011 episodes. I had 985, and this was like recorded, I want to say like June of last year.
Okay.
So
kind of
it was
insane.
A bit insane. But yeah, it was kind of cool to kind of see that. And, I've been on other podcasting platforms. Like I've guest hosted on, like What's on Joe Mind or the Podcasters Roundtable, or this one's super old and defunct from like 2007, but TF Anonymous, and which was Transformers Anonymous. And they had me narrate their Christmas story, which was kind of funny. And I don't remember if it was as me or as Megatron, but it was one of the two. But I mean, I've done a lot of guest, hosting, or I was a host of a show and a guest host on other programs on TF Wire back when that was a thing.
Because I'm thinking back to when I was listening to podcasts at the beginning and I stumbled across you guys. Yeah, you guys were not just doing GC, like the GCRN. You were doing a lot of others, and you guys would. I just remember Blanchard talking at nauseum about was it
Earth 2?
Earth 2, yeah. It was that, and then you were Predacon Empire. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was my Transformers website, and I associated all things Transformers with it. Although I let the name lapse, and I was like, forget it. And I have allthingstransformers.com now, so.
Okay.
which goes right to it. I mean, it goes right to the post. I don't even...
Back in the days where every podcast was mono and was only like 25 megs to download and sounded like bad AM radio.
You want to know what's funny about Altered Geek?
Sure.
I exported as mono.
I mean, here's the thing.
But you would never know because I export down... everything.
And the thing is now that we record each person on multiple tracks, it means you can have everything leveled right before you end up downsampling. Always record at the highest quality possible and then convert it after. The big mistake people make is recording at low quality, then editing, then saving it again at low quality, and then exporting.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you're better off, and that's the difference too between Skype and Discord. Skype, while you do have MP3 Skype call recorder, and it does work if you do the stereo thing, it still doesn't break down or level anyone's audio.
And it's recording it records the whole track at 128K a second, which is roughly what you would set your MP3 to when you put it on any platform anyway. But then any editing that you do further lowers it. You're like compounding your compression each time. Whereas, yeah, it's compressed when you record it through Discord, but they use a much more modern compression algorithm, so it just sounds better. Like you don't have to be an audio nerd or anything just to hear how much better it sounds, even without taking into account that you record everything on separate tracks.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about Discord is that when you use its call recorder, it allows you to save it as all the raw formats. So like AAC, WAV, FLAC. There's a couple other formats that M4A. So it does all these high uncompressed quality files, and it's and I kind of refer to this of what Mike Booth Ninja Powers used to say on the show is garbage in, garbage out. You record it, low end, like you just said, and you get low end, you get crap, just like you would have going in. So if you record it at high levels and then you export it lower, it's still going to sound good.
Well, and the other thing to consider too, is anytime that one of us goes off the rails and swears, it's a lot easier if you're going to put your Barnyard sounds on one person's track than having to like overlap everybody.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that's a nice thing too, is when you're messing around with it and like say Adobe Audition, I can mute everyone else's track except for the person in question.
Yep.
And edit only that person. Although the last episode, I was like, I'm too lazy for the Barnyard signs this week. I just was like, I'll just do ripple edits, and did ripple deletes on voices, and so I made them disappear without necessarily making it obvious.
We have a tone favorite, because pulling back the curtain, when Birdman edits, he still uses Cool Edit Pro because he thinks it's 2002. And that's because
Cool Edit Pro evolved into Adobe Audition.
It works. Here's the thing: it works. It's abandonware now. You can pretty much, there's actually many sites you can just get it from, because eventually it'll stop working. It has trouble with some versions of some of the newer creator updates on Windows 10. It'll crash sometimes, but he's like, I'm going to use that till I physically can't, because it's what he was trained in school on. I've used it, and it has some good parts to it, but it doesn't allow you to import certain formats. Like if you get like a royalty-free music clip and it's in anything other than MP3 or WAV, it will not work. Period. And then you have to use an intermediary to convert it. Whereas if you get a hold of Audition, any version, doesn't matter, any version of Audition will be significantly better.
Some of the older ones I've noticed though do not like. Well, actually, Audition's always been good. It's Adobe Sound Booth, which they merged the good stuff into Audition and then they phased it out. It's honestly not much better than using Audacity for a lot of the editing.
We use Audacity if we're recording local. It'll get recorded as a mono file, because we like at Birdman's studio, we don't have the space nor the cash to go with a high-end mixing board anymore. He had a really good one that died. We're not spending $900 or whatever he originally spent on it to get, a high-end mixing board that let you have multi-tracks, because most mixing boards are either going to be just stereo using analog out, or if they have a USB interface, for the most part, the maximum you can do is 2 tracks, like a left and right only. You have to go to like a significantly higher cost to have every single person record on a separate track. So,
well, yeah, and you can't use USB microphones. You have to use the old method.
Which we have. Like right now, I'm using a USB microphone, but I do have other dynamic mics and everything, which is cool. But that adds up, more cabling, more wires, more errors, more things that can happen. So when we're local, we'll record that way using a few inputs, but it records mono. But again, it's recording a full WAV file uncompressed because you're local, which is cool. So we've actually gotten to the point where we prefer using Discord, because for anybody on a budget that doesn't have a high-end, recording studio, it does allow like up to, I think it's 8 people can be recorded on separate tracks or more. And the nominal quality drop that you get from going online with it sure makes up for in the fact that you can save it as an Audacity file, and you can go in, like I will generally record everything, go in, do some leveling for whatever needs to be done, remove any audio hiss, anything that happens in the background, and then save it, save that multi-track file into a stereo file that then we can use in, whatever our choice of editing software is. And it's the little intermediary step that would be a pain in the butt if you were using like traditional Skype recording calls. And the built-in recording feature that they have in Skype now is horrendous.
I've never used it, mostly because I can't find it, and that's and honestly, I don't like Skype anymore.
I don't either. You just click there's a plus button, like you just click that and then click record, and it does it. Issue though, it does it
at like 32K, doesn't it?
Oh no! It is 16K per second mono, with a sample rate of I think 22 kilohertz.
That's horrible.
So it's half or less the frequency response that you get out of any other recording, and then like a fifth or sixth of the data rate that you get out of even the normal Skype recorder, like if you use a third party. So it's like 5% of the quality that we get when we record over Discord. And they thought that was a good solution.
That's horrible. Yeah, I haven't been a fan of Skype since Microsoft bought it, to be honest, because it's just pure garbage. And
it's kind of amazing how bad it is considering how good their voice chat features are on their gaming hardware. It's because like one hand doesn't talk to the other, and like you would have figured it would have been integrated. Like get the Xbox team to work on it, because if they did, you'd have crystal clear audio. But for whatever reason, they've kept it as a separate division.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem is it's just Microsoft.
Yeah, so like Discord is like a lifesaver, and I never thought I'd ever use it for, like, I was not a Discord person. I was like, why would I want to do that? Is it like Vent? And then people were like, you're old. And then I was like, okay, well, like, what's it good for? Oh, you can use it to record. And I'm like, what? And then, looking it up, and I went, oh, it's so easy. Like, it does so much work for you, and then you can play with whatever files you get when you're done.
Yeah, I vastly prefer Discord at this point for just cleaner audio. It's so much nicer to mess around with, and I'm not paid off by them by any means. But it's, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I find it to be much cleaner audio, like in general, and honestly, like
absolutely,
the levels are almost exact, and they even have a capability that they can auto level and auto clean up your audio right on their plugin.
I generally will use I'll use the Audacity file download for it, because it does a bit of that. It gets rid of most of the background noise without losing any quality. What I usually have to do is, my microphone is usually a tad quieter than everybody else's, and I do that on purpose so it doesn't ever peak at all. But when I record with Birdman, he, due to the nature of how his setup is at home, and because he's not at like a normal computer desk because of his disability, he records in his living room, and he's about a foot and a half away from his microphone, so his mic is always he always sounds a little thinner, and I usually have to do a little boosting to his lower end bass and cut out some of the high end, do a little tweaking. It's so much easier just to grab his stream and just go. I have a macro that I run where it does like a couple filters, and then bam, it basically sounds the same as mine. And it's so much easier to do that than record everything the traditional podcasting way of everybody's all on one singular track, and now we're screwed. Or you have to spend like 40 minutes having one person turn up their mic. No, turn it down a little bit. No, turn it up a little bit. Oh, make sure that you're close enough to the microphone. Don't talk away from it.
There's a nice little program, and I'm not sure you're aware of it. It's from the Conversions Network. It's a defunct software now at this point, but it's called the Levelator 2. And
never heard of it.
I didn't even know about it until about a week ago. I was talking to a friend of mine that uses it, and he said, so basically what it does is you drag a WAV or AIFF file, so it will auto level the entire track, and it creates a new exported output file. Like, it'll be the same file name .output, and with the still original extension. So if it's a wave, it'll say .output.wave, and so you'll be able to still use it. But what I've been doing to level the podcast is it saves a little bit of time, especially when there's elements where I'm not directly speaking in my microphone or somebody else isn't. I will attempt to level or boost as needed in the software, and clean it up, and then I will export the entire file, and then I put it through the as a AIFF file, and it will reconvert, and then I re-import that into Audition and export it as an MP3. And so everything is pretty well leveled when it goes to the final export. It's an extra step, and I'm sure it could be done in Audition. It's it auto does everything and I don't have to mess with it. So I just dump it in there and it works. But it's free. It's totally free.
That sounds like there's a lot of tools out there that I think go unnoticed by people, or like if you're trying to start a podcast, there's a lot of people like grasping at straws, like where do I go? What do I start with? And I think a good recommendation I would give, because we've had people ask, like, how, I want to start my own. How do I do it? And you don't have to go with a big content platform. Just like you can do it. Like there are guides out there on how to, if it's a small enough show and you're not going to be having a ton, like you're not doing daily shows or anything, and you want to just sort of get your foot in the water, you can go with a like a blogger site from like Google provides it for free when you have to sign up for Gmail, and you could actually use your 10 or 20 gigs of Gmail storage to host your files, because for the most part, if you compress them and you're hosting them yourself, your episodes are going to be less than 50 megabytes. And you're not going to be using a ton of data, and there's unlimited bandwidth when you use Google Drive for it to host it.
The only problem with that is you can't get accurate metrics from that.
And this is just for people starting out, right? Like
well, just starting out, there's another option too. There's podcast.com.
Yeah, that's true. You can go with one of those, and then it's just a matter of the recording of it. If you're just doing it singularly on your own, the easiest way to do it is just use Audacity to record your microphone and you talking, and you can play around with your settings to see how it sounds. And then and that's just if you're just for the pure recording. You can try editing. It's not going to be pretty. If you're adding in, it's going to be more difficult to add in layers of music and different things. So there's going to be free options out there to try. You can even you can go with something like Cool Edit Pro if you find a copy, because again, it's complete abandonware now. So
do you remember Goldwave?
Yeah.
I had that before I got any of the before I even got Audacity, because somebody was like, get Goldwave, because we were doing voice acting for this Transformers dub, and they're like, because I was like, I want to do it, I can do the voice, and I was like, I just don't have any software, and they're like, yeah, go with Goldwave, and they sent me a link to it because it was like pretty much abandonware at the time in 2005, and so I downloaded it and used it, and it was super difficult to use by any standards, and I found Audacity to be much easier to use, although you had to import the MP3 capability, which is built in now.
Okay.
And I remember starting out with that and recording. I recorded war stories for tfwire.com, which was essentially I read fanfics submitted by users to the website, and I would do them in different voices and narrate and everything else. So it was completely me doing the audio play. There was literally no sound effects or anything, which at the time I was like, didn't really know what I was doing. It was the first foray into the podcast world, and so it totally sucks. I still have it.
Well, it's a good stepping stone. It's a good thing to see how far you've come.
Yeah, I should actually go back and listen to that, and then like have a cringe-worthy episode where I'm just like, listening to myself do that, and because like the stories weren't half bad. It was the terrible acting on my behalf, because like a lot of the stuff just sounded like poor attempts at doing voices, and so yeah, I did that, and then I moved on to All Things Transformers, and again, it sounded like garbage because I started out and I was reading directly from a script instead of referencing it like I do now. And it was like I was trying to copy other shows I'd heard, and it just didn't mesh with my methodology. And I had a host that was a guest host on there, and for about 6 episodes, and then I ditched him and Mike joined. And then learning to edit some of the things, like periodically we'll have different issues come up. Specifically, there was an episode of the TFG1 podcast where we did the Beverly Hills Cop commentary with Dodd, myself, and him. And for whatever reason, my track was super slow motion. Like, my voice was talking, and so none of us could figure out what was wrong with it, and I kept re-importing it, and I would listen to the file was fine, but I'd import it and it would be slowed down again, and we had no idea what was causing it, and so that episode was kind of lost to time until later on. And just recently on the top 100 that just came out, Mike said that 2 of the people's voices did that on the episode, And I was like, really? I'm like,
they most certainly didn't when it was recorded. I did the audio leveling for everybody, and it was perfect.
He said that what was it? He said that there was one particular person. He says, the recording this week was extremely strange. Remember when your old Beverly Hills Cop slow down clip happened and you don't know how it happened? Well, he said when he was editing that like yours and Kevin's voices did that in this record. And I was like, and I was telling him, I said, the other thing that you could have done, I said, is just speed it back up.
Well,
I wasn't thinking about that either.
When I provided him, when I got the file, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, and so it's 4 individual tracks. It was a 2.5-hour recording, which can be pretty large to do even simple editing on any computer. You don't realize how much stress that can put on the CPU. But I went in, did some basic leveling, did some stereo mapping on it, then saved it as a stereo file. There's no reason that 2 voices should be isolated in doing that when they're both on the same stream. After the fact, right? Like, it's not like my individual track got messed up, because I played it back after I recorded. It was perfectly fine.
Yeah, I typically test mine just to make sure that everything worked out fine, or to see how much editing I need to do. And I don't foresee like a lot of the issue. I think some of it could be like processor speed and memory, and like it just not.
Who knows what computer he's using?
Yeah, well,
and it's Wi-Fi that he's doing.
He's got a 10-year-old computer at this point. It was new. It was new or rebuilt in like 2010, 2011. So, and I'm like, it's a dinosaur.
Yeah,
like,
it's probably
I have my dinosaur.
It's probably a case of it's not actually that the voices are messed up. It's that it's not even streaming the data to his like audio chip fast enough.
Which is entirely possible. Like my machine, I wanted to make sure that I future-proofed it so that it was built to be an editing machine. So like when I have these like huge 2 gigabyte WAV files that come out from Discord, it edits them just as fast as it does my MP3 versions when I was doing Skype.
Yeah, and I've got the same thing. I'm using a dual core, but it's based on the Ryzen 2 generation, 8 gigs of RAM, solid state hard drive. Nothing to write home about. Like, it's a sub $500 computer, but it for audio purposes, it literally is the same speed as my new Ryzen 6 core computer. I'm like, which has like an NVMe drive, and I'm like, why? I'm like, well, because there's a point where audio editing hasn't been. Like, audio itself and the transformation of audio hasn't been a focal point of like processor improvements over the years. It's always been video or compression, like data compression and that. So there really isn't anything out there like the old days where you had sound cards that had built-in special hardware to do all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all just dependent on the CPU. So but I'll bet you that my dual core Ryzen here, it will outperform his like 9-year-old computer.
Yeah, what's funny is my old tower has no dedicated video card in it. It's got the video that comes with the processor, and it runs fine. Like, I mean, it's still got most of its guts. Anything that was useful, I brought over to the new machine. But it's pretty much a shell, but it has everything it needs in it. I mean, for the most part. And my new system has an NVMe PCI Express hard drive in it. It's got a couple of solid states, a couple of SATA 3s, and then 32 gigs of RAM and then a 6-core processor. So I mean, it's pretty solid. But
oh yeah, just one thing to watch out on that NVMe drive. I don't know if you purchased anything with it, but it's worth paying about $10 on Amazon and getting a heat sink with one of those rubbery sort of heat transfer pads and holding it on with, like, it usually comes with like an elastic, because NVMe drives heat up like crazy. Like, they can go to like 100 degrees real fast. And I was finding that I was getting really good performance on mine initially on my main computer. I'd be like, after 20 minutes, it would slow down to a crawl. And then I looked at temperatures and I was like, oh, they don't even provide, that's the one thing, they don't give you, unless you get like a super high-end one, they don't give you a heat sink with it. and it is something to consider because when I put the heatsink on mine, it dropped like that $10 purchase dropped the temperatures to like less than half over like within like 2 minutes, because it's you're basically plugging in something and it's like pumping it full of juice, and it's so incredibly fast. Like you can move data like around so fast on those drives now. Like the transfer speed is faster than the entire hard drive spaces we had back in high school. And that's just like moving files around.
Yeah, and honestly, it's still. I mean, it has partially a heatsink that came on the motherboard with it, like specifically for that slot.
Oh, okay. So you have one of those ones where it has that sort of like a little plate that goes over top of it.
Yeah, it's a $200 motherboard from Gigabyte made for gaming, so it's got a lot of the built-in defenses for heat dissipation. It's got a lot of breathing room too, which is really nice.
Mine was I went with a medium, like mid-level $150 motherboard, and that was like a year and a half ago. So mine's actually a previous generation one that was future-proofed. So if I had shelled out an extra $50, it would have come with something like that. But yeah, that's one thing people don't realize if they're buying those super fast NVMe drives, is that they produce a lot more heat than any hard drive ever has in the past.
There's a lot of movement too.
Yeah. It's just because they transfer it 1 to 2 gigabytes per second. And it's like just fathom that. Like back in, you remember downloading, like if you wanted to download like a floppy disk's worth, like 1 megabyte back in the day, you used to take or copy that. It would take you to fill up that drive. It would take you 5-10 minutes just to fill up 1 megabyte. And it's like to hear, and now it's like, oh, that 1 gig, 3-hour uncompressed audio file. I'll transfer that, and it's done, like now. So, there's that comes with a cost. So, I have a feeling that with these longer episodes, especially when there's multiple people on it, it might be that Blanchard's computer's age is catching up with it, because I went back and listened to it and I didn't hear any issues. So, that's another thing to consider. Like with podcasting, is if you have more people on, the file size when you're working with it gets exponentially bigger. Because like it's a lot. One person talking for an hour on one track is one thing. When you get 4 or 5 people, you now have 5 times the file size to contend with, and it's an interesting world getting into. And to bring it back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, it's like I feel like if you really wanted to start a large social networky type of podcasting network, it really should have been done in like 03 to 06, right in the infancy of it, because that's when you would have established your name, even if you were like a nobody then, but you were around. And then as soon as podcasting hit the public consciousness on TV, when they were talking about it, when then people start looking and they'd be like, oh, who's established? Oh, these people have like 200 episodes already? They must be big, even if you weren't. And yeah. I think the issue is a lot of people like Twig and GCRN got in before the masses did in the 07 to 2010 period. And then from 2011 to 2016, there was just this massively huge boom with everybody has a podcast. Grandma has a podcast. And then now we're hitting the point where it's like oversaturated. You can't really, like, if you start a podcast, even if you have this like very fantastic idea, for anybody listening, don't expect like to get any listeners necessarily at the very beginning. Do it because you love it. And you may never hit that like million downloads. Most people don't. It's not like it was in the like the gold rush period, but it's a lot easier to, like, there's a double-edged sword. It's a lot easier to start now because you don't have to know how to code your own HTML website. You don't have to know
RSS either.
You don't have to know RSS, which is still a pain in the butt if you don't know how to set one up. And there's not as many easy to use like websites. You would have figured somebody would have had here's a website template that has it already set up for you. But there really wasn't that. Like it was still all hand done. And you remember back in the day when you had to worry about your own storage, you might only have not just like, I'm only paying for a gig of storage, which was expensive at the time, you would also have to pay for your bandwidth. So if you became popular, your show could only grow so big unless you wanted to pump more money into it. Now, with the advantage of cloud, storage and advances in just podcasting technology, you can pretty much have an unlimited storage space. You don't have to worry about your space. You don't have to worry about how much bandwidth you use. You don't have to worry about the speed. You just have to worry about setting it up. So it's made it so much easier to get into, but that also means that there's so many more people doing it.
Oh yeah, but also the most podcasters that there's a lot more drop off too.
But yeah, there's a lot where they start, do like 5 episodes, and they're done.
And I've done a couple of new shows where that's happened. Like I'll fizzle out and then like.
But I mean, like there's people that do it. Like there's a lot of people that do it and then never do anything else ever again. And then the problem is their podcasts are still up, and there is a point where I think if you haven't put out an episode in like a year and a half, don't delete the files, but it should be delisted. It should be run dormant unless you have a plan of action. Like iTunes should be like, you should get a notification. Are you coming back anytime in the next year? No? Okay, we're gonna close your account. We're gonna keep your files here. Somebody could possibly, like, you can host them, you can search them yourself, but we're not gonna have it listed. Yeah. Because like there's like, and if you want to argue, oh hey, well, I'm gonna get listeners, it's like, well, if you haven't posted anything in 3 years, you're not going to.
No.
At least not under that feed. It's not gonna be worth it. And I think if they got rid of that clutter, 2/3 of the podcasts out there would be gone out of the like most websites.
Oh yeah, easily. And then you'd actually be able to find shows that are current.
Yeah, like and if your show is, let's say you stopped making a podcast and it was insanely popular and it still gets 10,000 downloads a month or something. Well, it's like, okay, great. At that point, if you're still getting that kind of downloads, then you should try to capitalize on that, because if you're not going to, it shouldn't be listed anyway. Like you should, like there should be a thing on YouTube where it's like, if you do not release an episode a minimum every 2 months, you shouldn't have it listed.
No, I agree. It's yeah. I mean, and I think that's part of the problem is the market is so oversaturated on every front, and that's why it's harder to actually find anybody anymore other than these famous people.
Yeah, and it's like I almost feel like, hey, I should be friends with a famous person, because then if you guest on one of their podcasts, then you get listeners. That seems to be the only way to get it anymore. It used to be you get listeners by having celebrities and people show up on your podcast. Now you get maybe like you'll get an uptick of twice your downloads. But like looking at the metrics, it used to be like if you got, let's say, like a Mark Hamill to do a 10-minute interview, that's 20, 30, 50, 100 times what your listeners were. And then out of that 100 times, maybe 20% stay and keep listening. It doesn't exist anymore because all these celebrities go on every other celebrity's podcast,
or they start their own.
And you still get interviews with people. And if you look, like Twig used to get 20 interviews, 20 to 30 a year.
So did we.
We're getting maybe 2 to 3, and it's part of it is like you can get more people. You can request it, but it's scheduling, getting the time. A lot of times you'll ask, and they're like, oh, like what's happening sometimes now is they're requesting fees to do interviews.
Fees?
Yes, I've seen that now, and it's like, what? Or you go to a convention and you'll have press access. And they'll be like, oh, you can do an interview, it's fine. Oh, but you're going to be recording an interview? Okay, well, then you have to arrange that with their agent. You have to pay a fee. And it's like, no. You want exposure. This is how the interview process works. You get an interview. You do an interview, and we both benefit. It's like, but I'm seeing that happening now at certain ones. I know Fan Expo was like that in Canada. They are also notoriously hard to get even press credentials for. But like there was talk at certain people for interviews, like they're vetting your background, and it's like, oh, if you're not in the top 10 lists on iTunes or Spotify, you're not getting an interview. And it's like, but those top 10 people are regular media that are already doing like television interviews with you. Yeah. Isn't the whole point of Fan Expo to be catering to the fans?
And that's where a lot of them seem to be losing their ground, is that they're just not in touch with what they're actually founded from. But
and that's the thing. Podcasting was supposed to be the people talking in an unfiltered forum that was away from the corporate grind and corporate rules, and it's now becoming exactly the same. Doesn't mean we don't like it. We're not going to keep doing it forever and ever and ever until we can't possibly do it anymore. It just means if people wonder why you don't see as many interviews, it's because the opportunities aren't popping up as much as they used to. And when they do pop up, of course, you latch on to them and do them.
The other thing I've discovered, and I did this earlier this year, like actually at the beginning of this year, doing interviews with people that aren't necessarily famous, but they're people that put out specialized content. And when I say that, I mean, we had, I interviewed a plethora of people on Altered Geek, like that were other podcasters, other geeks, Twitch streamers, podcasters, producers, writers, public speakers, producers of other programs. And I was kind of doing it just, one, I was a part of a podcast group. It's an email thing, and basically you submit and say, they'll randomly pick you, and then you say, yeah, this is my show, this is blah blah blah, and then you give them the show art, and then people submit in a Google Doc to sign up to be on your show. And then because I had so many that were asking to be on the show, and I had no way of scheduling them, I created a scheduler, or I put a scheduler plugin in WordPress on alteredgeek.com, and gave them, I opened up certain time frames that I was available, and then I let them choose when they wanted to do it. And then once that block was filled, it was filled, and then I could schedule them according to that time. And I think I had 13 people that I did, and then every Wednesday I had an interview show, and then every Friday I did one of these, and it worked out pretty well during that time. It wasn't as monumental as your Kevin Conroy's or a lot of these voice actors or anything, but it was still it was different because nobody's doing that.
Well, and that's the thing. I know with the Terrible Warriors that other podcasts that we record with, they have found their avenue with interviewing creators of tabletop games. They'll actually contact the people, not just the publishers, the people that are writing the games. They actually will do interview the creators, and then they'll do their playthrough of 3 or 4 hours of the game, sometimes with the creator of the game. And that's interesting because they're not people that are looking to interview people for tabletop gaming. They're trying to get people that have larger followings. They're trying to get your Will Wheatons on, and that's yeah, but he's not the creator of the game. It's just he runs games, and he's famous for that, or famous for
you're never going to get those type of people again, and that's the sad and unfortunate thing is you might get lucky.
Yeah, but, or you can rely on people you already interviewed or people that in the industry, to get you in around things, which is cool. But you got to find your avenue. You got to find the thing that differentiates you out there. Now, I know Birdman's going to be doing an interview in the next few weeks. I'm drawing a blank on the person's name, unfortunately, but there's a horror documentary on. I forget which Hades horror franchise. I think it's Friday the 13th. And there's the Mike requested, can I get a press screener to watch the documentary because he's super into 80s horror. And then they were like, oh yeah, we like your podcast. Would you like to interview the director? And it's okay. So those opportunities do still come up, and those are going to be the interesting ones where it's again, it's somebody who maybe isn't the most famous person yet, but they got a movie coming out and they really want to talk about it. So it's actually more exciting to do that. Whereas the big gets, in quotes, used to be getting all of your favorite celebrities back 10 years ago. And now, we just popped up, I think it's today's Wednesday. I believe when I put up the classic episode, I think it was an interview with Robert Picardo.
Yep.
And it's there's those ones. Cool. Would we get Robert Picardo again? Maybe, because we've had a relationship where we had him on before. But if we were cold calling him now, we're not getting him.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is I definitely we've had a couple of repeats simply because we've talked to them in the past. And that in some of them we've got to reach back out to again because they've got some new content coming that we're very interested in. But it's definitely changed a lot. The whole atmosphere over the last, I would argue the last like 5-6 years, just because I've seen numbers like taper off. I've seen traffic taper off because, like, if you're not one of these big conglomerates, or you're not one of these big places that people are going to hear these famous people, for instance, like
if you're not Podcast One, Westwood, if you're not on,
or
if you're not on one of the top 5 networks where we're talking, there's millionaires running it. You're probably not getting. You're not being able to sign. Like, they're signing casting agents. So, like, they're going to talent agencies and being like, can we get 10 people from your thing? And they'll be like, oh, here's who we got that are going to be, available in the next week. And they'll get it. Like, they're running them like they run late night talk shows.
Oh yeah, definitely. And one of the problems I had, what was it? When did I get that? I got an email. It was a while back. There was somebody from, I want to say it was like Podcast One, maybe, or something. I don't know, but they had a new show that was coming, and they were really trying to push it, And they contact me and they're like, hey, would you mind doing, an ad for this particular show? And they were like going to pay and everything else. And I was like, yeah, it would depend. I'm like, 1, who is this guy? Like, 2, like, cause I'd never heard of him, and he was like some kind of a tech guy or whatever. And I was like, I'm interested, like, cause obviously money's involved, but at the same time, I have no idea who this guy is. So, like, for me to talk about him, like, I kind of have to have a little bit of an understanding.
It's also like, you have to balance that whole. It's also a little offensive that knowing that they're going to pay you, whatever they're going to pay you to promote somebody who on their first episode will probably have more listens than you have all year because of the money they're putting behind this person. Oh
yeah, definitely. And that was the other thing, is like, he was in the top, probably the top 20 in iTunes for something. And
because now the difference from 10 years ago is you can buy your way in there.
Oh yeah, well, you can go on Fiverr and you can pay, and they can boost you into the top numbers. Like, I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, there's that, or the old fashioned Reddit campaigns where somebody be like, oh, because really all it takes is one person of influence to push somebody through. The problem is you got people circling like vultures, being like, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me.
Oh yeah, totally. And it kind of bothered me that they even approached me like that. Like, I'm like, okay, guys, like, I don't mind promoting somebody, but like, I'm also not going to be inauthentic and like just, yeah, the money sounded good, like how much they were offering, but
and the thing is, we're also, there's Twig is different in that we have an open door policy on all the things we can say, censorship wise. We'll goof around, we'll be very crass blue, but what we're not doing is we're not selling dick pills. We're not selling, what I mean? Like, every freaking podcast now is selling Blue Chew or Me Undies, or like it's to the point where it's ridiculous. It's like really, you gotta, like, that's what you think of podcasting. It's so bottom feeding that you have to sell prescription Viagra over the, like, so gray area Viagra penis pills over the internet.
And the other thing could be too is people just don't see any other way of monetizing their show, and so they just kind of eat it up, and do it.
The people that are hawking this are the people that have 1 million listeners. People on very large networks, like, they're selling crap and doing live reads of crap that is like these are, like, you're making enough money as it is off of your brand, just like, because most of the people that are getting those kind of listeners are also doing like live shows in person, where they're selling tickets, or they're touring, or it's a side business. There's almost nobody that I've ever heard or seen that does all these ad reads for these products that this is their only source of income. So it bugged me. Like, nobody's approached us being like, would you like to sell dick pills? I'm not saying we wouldn't sell them. I'm saying that I'm saying for the price. Hey, if they were like, you release 2 episodes a week, we'll give you $1,000 a week to talk about these dick pills. Damn straight, I'm going to talk about them dick pills. But if you're just like, we'll pay you $10 an episode, screw off. No way, it's not happening. Because you never know how much they're going to try to offer you. But like, that seems to be the big one. Is like they're advertising like pseudo stuff that I know personally isn't legal in Canada. Like you cannot, like the Blue Chew stuff, you cannot get it in Canada because it is listed as an untested illegal substance, and it's been caught at the border a few times. Because I noticed that some Canadian podcasts were originally starting to sell that stuff or offer it, or have the codes for it for like American listeners, I guess, because up here you couldn't get it anyway. But they've completely stopped because there's a lawsuit involved. But yet in the States, they're hawking that crap left and right. There's like, or you have the people that get the Audible one where it's like, mention get your free ebook on Audible, blah blah blah.
Yeah, the whole Audible thing, I did that for a while during MWire when it was like still pretty fresh, like before everybody else was like kind of really doing it. And I never had anybody sign up through it. It was I tacked it onto the intro. It was something I thought I would try, just to see. And I want to say it was like during like 2012 or something. It was when everybody.
Same with Amazon Associates. They shut down Amazon Associates in Canada because they weren't getting enough people, like that were even clicking through the links and doing it.
I have an account through that, but yeah, nobody clicks on it. And
the thing with Audible, they contacted me a couple weeks ago. Would you like to be a part of the program? Okay, let's see what it says. Like 2 days later, and the same person contacted me. Oh, you're in Canada. Well, we don't actually have the service in Canada. Is that okay? Because if you mention it, you'll have to say it's for American users only. Like, yeah, okay, well, what does it entail? Well, I guess I'm like, so you want me to promote something that you're like, I actually asked. I said, so you're this is open, wide to pretty much anybody. Yes. Okay. Who hasn't signed up for one at this point? Like, who hasn't actually signed up and taken advantage of that one free book?
See, I figured out what they've done. They've essentially turned podcasters that are doing this for fun to try and make money. They've turned them into the free advertising pool.
Well, but then again, it's so saturated because it's so free, and any podcast can get it. We're at a point now where I don't think there's a single listener out there that hasn't tried Audible that still would like to try Audible.
I tried it back when we got it for Movie Week in Review. I tried it. I got it for free, and I downloaded a Star Trek book, and then that was it.
But I mean, like, it's been around so long now. It's like they're not converting new people, so I don't know why it exists. It's they have it there because they don't have to pay you anything, and because every time you say Audible, it might bring somebody back who's already had it. So yeah. I don't think that they're converting new people, and that's that's a discussion for another day.
So they don't have to pay you.
Exactly. They're tricking people into giving them free advertising.
Yeah. And this is the other thing too, is like, I don't know if you've been getting inundated with people wanting to post guest posts on your website.
Oh, I can read you one. Today. They're all from India or China.
Well, see, this is the thing. I either get them and they either come from some like marketing company or something, or they come from a Gmail account. If they're from a Gmail account, I automatically spam them and like I put them in my spam folder and I wipe them out. If they're the other ones, I'll humor it and I'll respond, and then I wait to see how long it takes them to respond back. But I send them this response because typically I had one offer me $100 to post a custom crafted article to geekcastradio.com, and they're like, for $100, we'll do this and we'll write up this article, and then they start telling me, in the next email what it's about. And they're like, I bet you get these quite often, blah blah blah, and I says, I appreciate your reaching out, and I do get these quite often now. To be honest, I will say I can and will do this, but payment is definitely a deciding factor. As you can understand, it's a time thing. The only stipulation is I will not post anything pertaining to sex, gambling, lotteries, alcohol, drugs, etc. Basically, if it's not family friendly, I won't allow it. If you can send a sample, I'd appreciate it so I can determine if it's a fit for our audience. Hope this answers it, and I look forward to hearing from you. Most of the time, I never hear from them again.
Well, here's the one I got today, and this was to the feedback email from Bavish Nardani. It's probably a fake name because they usually are. So I don't mind reading it. Hi, excuse the impersonal email. I am a London-based copywriter. Why are you contacting us in Canada? And write regularly for several clients that relate to the content of your blog. The topics I write on including interior design, lifestyle, home products, family, and so on. I'm writing to offer any articles at no charge to you that you can host in your blog. First of all, the website, yes, it's set up as a WordPress site like a blog site, but that's not really the intention. It's a release site to show when we have articles released. The only blog posts we really post are when we do gift guides, or if we're doing content on press conferences and stuff. So it's they will, of course, only be shared if I think your audience will be interested in them. Well, it's like, first of all, and there's a little more on search engine optimization. You get a lot of those emails too. To give a taster, here are some blogs I write for: memorybox.co.uk, esbflooring.com. Yes, flooring, and This Week in Geek. Rhodiumfloors.com. It's a ghostwriter. First of all, I'm not giving you access to the website to write stuff on there, because as soon as I give you access, you're going to try to grab some crap from it. Let me know if there's something you're interested in. We can move the conversation forward. Keep up the excellent work. You have no idea who we are. Outreach specialist, and I mean, it's from a real company. It's Anova. I looked them up. They're in London, but like, they're just literally going like, they're searching for any podcast, and they're just sending out a form email.
Yeah,
and that's just one of them. Like, we get crazy ones, or you get the ones that are like, you get common ones are search engine optimization ones where they want to guest writing your thing. It's one thing if you contact us through Facebook and you're wanting to start up, you're like, hey, I wanted to write some blog stuff. I wanted to do it, because we've done that a few times where Birdman gave access to some people, either fans or people that wanted to get their start, and they wanted to write a couple guest blogs, to get their feet wet sort of on what it's like to publish something or to post things. And then he'll do a few of them, but it's like it's on a person to person basis, and not some random person from halfway around the world that only writes articles on flooring. Like it would be one thing if this person was like, hey, I write tech news. Like, okay, maybe we wanted to have more of a news section that was regularly updated with stuff from, I don't know, some stuff that's aggregated from Ars Technica or product news from like CES events and that. It's like, okay, maybe, but you know what? It would be somebody that we'd know that wanted to do it. It wouldn't be a random person in India or London or China. At least this one was worded properly. The ones we get from China are crazy. It's always, we make handbags, or we make sprockets and parts for cars. Would you guys be interested in reviewing what? Like reviewing like a car part from China? Like how? Or we make handbags, and one of these days I'm going to say yes, and we're going to have like twig handbags and purses, because one of these days.
Well, one of the funny things, I get like a lot of articles, either people wanting to be guest writers, and they're like, I have this great idea for a post, and I'm like, most of the time I'm like, okay, free content, I don't really care, but I still proof everything, and I make them send it to me in an email, or I make them use the contact form I developed on the website where they can post the entire article there, and it goes through into the back end database that I can then copy paste, and it's ready to go. But like, I don't give anybody access.
Yeah, you don't give access. Like the best one, that Birdman turned it down, and I was so mad at him because I really wanted the content, and I knew if anything was going to get us listeners or weirdness, would have been this, was when he randomly at E3, not this past year, the year before, was offered a gaming prostate massager, basically a sex toy that you're supposed to stick in your butt.
Wow.
while it was going to be Bluetooth connected to your phone, and while you play games, when certain things happen, noises happen, it vibrates in your butt. And he turned him down. He said flat out no. And then he messaged a bunch of other people, and a bunch of other people that went to E3 that he knows through the journalism industry got the same things. And everybody turned it down. And I'm like, no, you don't turn that down. That is the best content ever. I said, he goes, well, we're not going to use it. I said, we don't have to use it. We just have to talk about it and explain, look at what we got. And he goes, oh, because that's the only time where like it was so outlandish that it wasn't like a bot. It was somebody actually trying to sell these things. And we would have taken it. Like I told him, I said, we wouldn't take it. We wouldn't have like been like, it would have been a little disingenuous because we weren't going to try to sell it for them, but we would have ripped it a new one and made fun of it so hard. But like, of all the things to get offered in one of these, like, it's a prostate massager. It's like, really? So
yeah.
if it ever pops up again, I'm telling them, you do not decline that. We get that. We talk about that.
Yeah, that would honestly, that'd be hilarious. But yeah. That's such a weird item. Not gonna lie, that's just weird.
Like it was so out there that I was like, there's certain things that you turn down.
But your guys' fan base would resonate with that just because it's so out there. Like,
well,
whereas like mine, it wouldn't go with that.
Well, I mean, and it's the image that you're trying to cultivate is very different too. It doesn't mean you don't fit, like you fit in with anybody, but at the same time, the image you're putting out there is not the image of wild video game sex toy. Like it's not. That is it's very much a twig, weird, keep it strange, unique. Like the fan base that Birdman has been sort of cultivating over the years has been the like anything is cool, bronies, like anything that is unique, geeky to you, he takes it, no matter how outlandish it might seem to other people. He takes it and goes with it. And I was surprised he drew the line with this, and I'm like, dude, take him up on the offer, because like it's the kind of content I not that we're like Howard Stern, but it's that sort of attitude of,
you guys are almost like borderline there with like some of it.
Yeah, it's like not shock jock. It happens a bit, but it's like we are not we don't restrict ourselves to anything, and like we are the definition of like explicit content. But it doesn't mean we're explicit for the sake of being explicit. But like, we'll cover pretty much anything. Like the one company sends us pornos. Guess what? We're reviewing some pornos, and like we'll do it where we cut out all the sex. Which I'm trying to get back to. We've got a few that we've got to do, and the hard part is getting the edit points to cut it out. So we review it as if it's like a regular Hollywood movie. So these movies end up being like 25 minutes long instead of like 2 hours of porno, and it's like, well, the acting wasn't so great in this part, and the people that give them to us, they're actually okay with that because it's a different type of content than what they're used to. It's basically,
well, you guys are putting it in a different light.
It's porn without porn. It's like, well, what was the acting like? Well, the story was hard to follow, that sort of thing, and it ends up being funny because not a lot of podcasts would necessarily go that way, and we'll do that, and that's where our identity is. Like, I almost feel like we're the R-rated to NC-17 version of GCRN. And GCRN is like the PG-13 borderline R-rated, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Ultra Geek is like PG. That makes sense.
Yeah, pretty much PG, maybe PG-13. Depends on the day.
Depends on how angry or tired you are, or if you have one of us on.
Yeah, that's pretty much like I can pretty much guarantee it's gonna be probably like. Yeah, I don't know, like pretty much PG-13 most often. Like, because even some of the very slanted, like, I don't know, it's not quite there anyway. But it kind of floats around depending on who's on or how irritated I am at some particular company.
How grumpy Blanchard is when he's on.
Yeah, usually, but yeah.
Get off my lawn. Damn it.
I do get a lot, like quite a bit of different contact though from just different organizations or different blogs that are like, hey, would you post this for me? And I'm like, yeah, what's the context? Like, what am I supposed to get out of this? Like, somebody sent me, they're working on an article for their site, and I've posted something from them in the past. It must have been like superpowers or something, or vehicles or weapons from like sci-fi content. So they said, you know, what was it that they sent to me this time? It was 100 years of time travel in film, and it's a very short infographic. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, there's not enough here. Because if you're talking 100 years,
are you trying to promote it on your site, sort of thing?
Well, I mean, they wanted my honest commentary, like written in a blog. I mean, because one, it's got their link on the image, which I don't honestly care, because there's usually residual cross-linking in some capacity. But they talk about, like, on this infographic about how, in the movies where anything is possible. Well, TV does it too, but okay, I'll put that aside because it says specifically for in film. Well, then they talk about, time, top methods of travel. It says time machine, portal, science experiment, and then it's got, backward, forward.
Sounds very like as if a 12-year-old put it together.
Some of the graphics almost kind of give me that thought.
Like somebody's like, they're going for the bare minimum to clickbait you in, but then not giving you any real examples.
Yeah, I mean, well, and then it says biggest year of time travel, 10 time travel movies released in 2013. Okay, well, it doesn't list any of them. Then it says 110 time travel movies produced since 1921. And then it says top earner, 2.8 billion, Avengers Endgame. And then it says our favorite time travel films. And then it has, and I've never heard of this film, so it doesn't resonate with me. And it should resonate. It says, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, 1921.
No.
First film with time travel,
yeah,
as part of the plot. Then they go Planet of the Apes, the original one. Then they say Superman.
Well, here's the problem. Planet of the Apes, the original one, is not a time travel movie.
Yet.
The
second one.
Yeah, it's not a time travel movie till the very end of the second one. But
the
original Planet of the Apes is not time. Falling asleep and being frozen is not time travel. It's just normal. It's just regular sci-fi.
Yeah. It's just aging, yeah, and so they list that, and then they get Terminator, then they get Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Groundhog Day, Back to the Future,
so
Interstellar.
They're listing every big mainstream movie, but not necessarily ones that.
This is the thing.
Culturally important.
I called them out, and you got to wait for this, because then they go, and then they explain why each one is, whether it's a time loop or. Why this and why that, or they use this, and then they put Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. They put one of the best rewind plots in history, and I'm like, I'm like, no, I would argue Groundhog Day is better, but
yeah,
but,
or even Edge of Tomorrow is a better repeat one.
Yeah, and so like I sent them back this message. I said. Because I'm not wanting to shy away from like you screwed up, so partially. So I go, looks pretty cool, but I noticed a lot is missing from this infographic. None of the Star Trek content, which is famous for time travel, is listed. Not counting the series, the films numbered 4, 7, 8, and 11 all featured time travel in them, in varying capacities.
If you go with popularity, 4 is like even people that don't watch Trek know the Voyage Home. They're like, oh, the time
because
travel
it's the least Trek film out of all of them.
Yeah, like it's a pop culture phenomenon. It's like, oh, that's the one where they travel back to the 80s. It's like, yes,
yeah, when it was shot, and then it says also Looper, Hot Tub Time Machine, etc. All those are missing.
The fantastic Deja Vu with Denzel, fantastic movie.
Yeah.
People forget about it.
Yep, I forgot about that one, but that one is a good one too. But I says I do like some of the ones listed, but you almost can't have a time travel list without Star Trek in it somewhere. And then they're like, thanks for the feedback. Although we couldn't include all time travel movies in the graphic alone, we're going to be expanding on a bunch more in our blog post going live next week, and whatnot. And so
okay, so we're not including the most important ones.
Yeah, it's almost like we're going to list them in a blog post because they're runner up. They don't count. And it's like, okay, well, it's like if you want to really count it though, Star Trek did there were 5 or 6 episodes in the original series in the 60s.
Did they at least have the original or the remake of the Time Machine listed?
No.
So the most important, the very first time travel book ever written. They didn't include the movies based on that.
Nope.
Literally, the story that every single time travel movie is based on about altering timelines is not included.
Yeah. So
Okay.
as you could see, I was nitpicking, and I knew there were other ones I was forgetting. I was just nitpicking because I watch Trek on a pretty regular basis, and it was severely lacking anyway, and so I was having a hard time coping with that, to say the least. And so, yeah. So suffice it to say, I may not get all the advertisements for the podcast. I get them for the website because the website is old. And well, I should say the domain name is old. The website is not. But there's a lot of backlinkage, and so like I'll have people that'll send me a blog post and say, "Hey, could you link me link this article to this post or something in XYZ location?" And most of the time I delete the emails. I used to like be nice about it, like and say, no, I don't want to go back. and even though they'll give me the URL and I don't want to post it in there, it's mostly because like, one, you're just trying to piggyback on my content. And then two, it would be different if like they were going to pay something. Cause like, I'm honestly not going to do it for free. Cause like,
I mean, even if it's
I don't even know these people. So like, that's
like, if somebody offered you, they were like, "Hey, I don't have cash, but I can give you like a $50 Amazon card." You'd be like, "Okay," for an old link on a page that I'm not necessarily using anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I would do it for that, but I mean, there has to be some kind of a like give and take. Like, you want something from me, you have to offer something, because it's. And I've had a few people that have like honestly just they'll PayPal stuff and be like, "Here you go." I'm like, okay, whatever.
I mean, and that's the thing. You don't get anything for free. This is not the case of your friend. Like, we're not like, "Hey, Steve, can you put a new link?" Like, let's say we were going to launch a new site, which I think, we're going to have to update the website sometime.
I'll help you with that.
Yeah, because even upgrading, like, it's time to upgrade the WordPress and all that. But even doing that,
you might want to move web hosts while you're at it.
That's what I was going to. Yeah, that's something we'll talk about at another time. But yeah, we're at a point now where, because we're not hosting the episodes ourselves on the site, it's kind of redundant having it the way it's set up, and it might be good to, like, we'll still have the backlog and have everything there and have everything, we'll still probably end up using WordPress or something, but it's time for a refresh, because this is Twig 4.0, and it's probably been 4.0 for 9 years now?
It's about 5.0.
Is it 5.0?
Yeah, I made the last two versions of the site. So.
Okay. But still, it's been about 5-6 years, right? In this current format, if not more.
Yeah, something like that.
So it's probably time to make it a little more cohesive and tighten it up a little bit. But let's say we relaunched a new version of the site, did new logos and everything, and we were like, "Hey, Steve, could you put a link to us on yours?" It's like, yeah, we're really good friends, and we have cross promotion. We do podcasts together. It's a different story of me asking you or you asking us than some rando.
Oh, exactly.
Or if you had you get feedback on the regular basis. You had one of the fans saying, "Hey, I'm launching my own podcast on anime or something. Would you mind putting a link in there?" Sure, because you know who the person is, and
like if it was a fan, I would definitely do that. Like, because that's they've listened to me. It's only fair. I mean, I would do it.
But yeah, it's kind of amazing. Just like, and I guess they're playing a numbers game. Like, they're sending a wide net. They're just like, here, they did a search for, let's say you talked about, or let's say there's a product that came out that you talked about for whatever reason, and that's the key term they searched for in Google. They found every podcast that had a review or talked about this topic. They're sending a form email to everybody, and they're just hoping that one person will post that link.
Oh, definitely. And I just don't play by that game. I don't have that kind of time on me.
Yeah, and I know, like, there was even stuff like, I know Birdman was offered to work for, I forget what website it was, but they wanted him to write articles on things, and it's like the pay they were going to give, like a lot of these websites, these blog sites, what they offer is not even like a word per minute. I remember he ended up asking, "So what's my my rate per word?" And they were like, "What?" And this was like a fairly we're talking website that was getting probably 1 million traffic per month, and it's like they didn't understand the standard rates that you get paid to write for, like that you learn in school for journalism. And he's like, yeah, so what am I getting paid per word? And they're like, well, we were giving it's like a per article thing, and it's like, well, how long's the article got to be? And then they're like, well, it's got to be a minimum of this and this, and he's like, so he did the math. He's like, so you're saying I'm going to be working for less than $1 to $1 per hour because of what they were sort of expecting the length and making sure that it's concise. Like, and there are people that think like, oh, I'll get $50 to write this article. It's like, but if it takes you 5-6 hours to write the article, it's not worth it.
Yeah, see, and I can comment on that because when I was working for one tech website, writing, and while I was laid off, they would pay you $30 for a 400-word article, or up to 500 words, and then the other one they would pay you $50 up to like between 700 and like 1,000. And at the time, like, I had no income. I didn't really care, but I was blowing like 3 to 4 hours on the longer ones because they would give you articles that you had no idea any of the tech information. Like, I had to write articles about iOS devices. I've never owned one, and I don't like them.
Yeah, it's insane, and they'll give you like the basics. Like, here's what we want you to write about, or here's the topic, and it's like, and go and put it in your own words so that it sounds like it came from you, and it's like, well, that's disingenuous.
In this particular site, though, they would basically take articles from like 2 to 3 other sites. Mostly it was the same site, and they would say, hey, we want you to write this article, and this is kind of the basis, and this is the link, and you have to do the SEO linkage for, you know, Google purposes of cross-linking in the website on the post, and we want a minimum of 5 of those. Then you got to write the thing for the newsletter, and then you got to write the title, and then, you know, the whole article, and if there was any pictures or anything else, and or video or something. And I wrote probably 40 articles for them, and then they had some kind of a staff changeover, and I never heard from them again after that. I mean, I got paid for all of it, but it was still like I never heard from them again, and I was like churning out articles faster than anybody else after I got the hang of it. And they were all quality articles. It's just that, you know, just whatever reason, they just stopped contacting me back, and I'd email them like, hey, I'm ready for more articles, and they'd have to assign them, but I haven't heard from, I can still log in, but I don't see anything now. But
it's again, it's like they don't want bots to rate their content because then it comes out looking like garbage. Like, how many times have you gone to look for a review on a product, and either a YouTube channel is just the product spinning in a picture with like Microsoft Sam reading off the specs, or you go to a website and you're looking for the review and it's the same review on 30 or 40 websites, and it's just listing the product and telling you why it should be good. Not that it is good, not that there's an actual opinion, but why it should be good based on the specs.
Yeah, and those type of things should just be blacklisted from Google, honestly, because it's a waste of internet like traffic. And I understand that they pay for it, but it sucks.
We're getting to the point now where the internet is looking like the 1990s depiction of the future internet without ad blockers on. But the problem is you can turn an ad blocker on, it doesn't. But the ad blockers don't block entire websites where it's like, oh, this website shouldn't exist.
Yeah. There's a browser I actually use called Brave. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Briefly, I think.
So what essentially it does is it uses the Chrome engine, and it's a browser, and it runs just like Chrome. It runs on Chromium, and it functions and looks almost exactly like it. So what it does is it allows you to you can turn shields up and shields down for sites. So like, let's say I go to Twitter or TweetDeck, and I got shields up. And what it says is 99 plus items blocked. And then it shows you whether there's cross-site device recognition blocks, cross-site cookies, connections upgraded to HTTPS, whether it has to or not. And then it says cross-site trackers blocked. And then it shows you all of the trackers. And there's probably like 300 of them here. where Twitter just tracks you on this. And so if you've got shields up, they can't track you, and they get zero data from it. So I use it whenever I'm on like any of the social media, you know, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, any of those things. And it's actually really nice. I use it on Facebook. It doesn't block as much because Facebook doesn't have as many trackers as TweetDeck does. But again, if you go to facebook.com, this is a hilarious thing. There's Google ads and Facebook campaign ads, and it blocks, and that's all they are, or like pixel.facebook, where they track your whatever the images are or whatever with it. So it blocked 14 things just from like our Messenger window, for instance, or Hotmail. It blocks, you know, the cross-site trackers from various sources. And so I use this, and it actually, there's, when you launch a new tab, it says, for instance, since I started using this, it says 120,000 ads and trackers blocked, 2,600 websites upgraded to HTTPS, 1.7 hours estimated time saved. Because what it essentially does is it speeds up your internet process by blocking those right from the get-go. So your pages actually load. And it's a beautiful tool.
It's basically like, there were tools similar to that back in the dial-up days that were like built into your actual like net zero dialing software. They would, like, it's remember the internet boosters? All it did was turn off that. So
yeah, I remember that. And it would turn off images too.
Yeah, turn off images, turn off ads, and it would cache, like, you could pick, like, if your computer had enough storage, it would cache the most, like, 10, 15 most common sites you went to, at least their landing pages, back when everything was, like, still using inline frames. So, like, the outskirts of you know what I mean? Like, the outskirts of, like, the tabled page would have, like, inline frames and everything. So your menus would load instantaneously because, you know, that stuff very rarely changed on the website, and it would only be whatever was on the main content of the, you know, this is before blogging really existed, but, you know, like the main page would be different. So you could go to a website and it'd be funny, like you'd have the border of the website loaded like instantaneously, and then you'd have to wait your 10 seconds for your page to load in the middle instead of a full minute for everything.
So something, since we were talking about shows and iTunes and everything else, so I'm going through, like, I don't know if you've gone through the new categories since they switched.
I set up, like, I tried to set up our categories, but I found that it was almost, there was even less to categorize. Like, there's more options, but they're tuned in such a way that Twig doesn't fit into a lot of them.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem, is like Altered Geek doesn't really fit into a lot of them either. And so
like,
it has
going to be like lifestyle tech would probably be the only thing, and I don't even know if there is a category for that.
Not really. Like, I know, like, TV reviews, because we have a lot of those on Geekcast Radio. When you go to that page, like, we used to have 2 or 3 of them in the top 20. Well, because a lot of the other shows that are like famous people or YouTubers or some of these other jackrabbits that are in the top, they like Tooncast is in number 40, and All Things Transformers is at number 54 or 55 under the TV reviews section. And this is under like the TV and film, for instance. And then if you go to, I want to say, we have a few other shows. I'm just trying to find them. But it's just like these new categories, like, while they're great having film reviews or you know, TV reviews or after shows or things like that, you don't, unless you're one of those big popular hosts, you're not going to see your show in there. Like AfterBuzz TV, for instance, they put out a ton of crap. Well, they fill up the after shows because they do a lot of after shows. And
I feel like the way to solve this, honestly, is you should only allow, like, if you're going to be in the top 10 of a category or something,
it shouldn't show up in another one.
The owners, like yeah, exactly. You should only be in one, unless there is an overlap. Let's say because you can pick your 3 or whatever. There's a possibility to be the top in all 3 if you're really, really downloaded. Now, at the same time, I also don't feel like if you have after shows, right? Let's say you have an after show for this, there's like a million after shows that you have. You shouldn't be able to fill up everything with your one brand. It should be brand specific. Like, I wouldn't mind if because This Week in Geek has a few shows we run. Well, maybe This Week in Geek should be listed as it shouldn't be top shows. It should be top producers or top brands, because then GCRN would have a higher chance of being up there because it would aggregate all of your listens and all of your downloads from all of your shows, and it'd be like, here are it shouldn't be listing individual shows. It should be listing who the creators are, because then your podcast ones would be screwed, because it would be like, sure, they have the top 10 downloaded show programs, but they would only be listed as one, because
in that, I think that would help, having the different networks listed once, because like Podcast One or Studio 71, I did find the podcast that was trying to have me market their show, and it's that Marquise Brownlee, MKBHD or whatever. He does a podcast called Waveform, and he does like tech podcast and gadget stuff. He had a YouTube show reviewing stuff, and he was telling me this, and I'm like, who? And I talked to a few people
because they're oversaturated too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them. Like, honestly, I don't care if I'm going to listen to somebody talk about tech. I'm going to go to Leo Laporte, like Tech TV.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you had said that name, I'd be like, oh, I know who that is. And the fact that he's not like number one in tech category period is disheartening, because it's like,
now they do have a category called longest running shows under technology, which he's number one, but they also listed this waveform under leisure, which I don't know how this is leisure. Like the only reason it's number one in leisure is because they mismarketed it on purpose. So I almost wonder if you game the system by changing your stats to purposely get in a different category. That, like,
if I put myself under like knitting would be
well, like for instance, the poll bag, it's comics. Okay, they used to have a comics section on iTunes or something. They're very similar. They have now under leisure is, because it was like hobbies and fiction or something like that before, and so that's where it was at. Well, now it lives under the leisure animation and manga category,
which makes it sound like animation. Like, they're making it sound like anime only. Like,
yeah, well, it says animation and manga, and so what's funny is you have Saturday Morning Cartoon Boom or something is number one. Then they got a Pokemon podcast, and then they've got a Digimon one in there, and Dragon Ball Z, and then lo and behold, number 8 is the pullback in that top 20 list, and it's been there, and it's been climbing to the top because it doesn't fit under any other category, and so therefore it's there. And so it's very humorous to me to see how some of these things are laid out. Because like they go from all different ranges in here, like hobbies, that's another area, and you've got everything from knitting to ham radio to World of Warcast, or Trivial Warfare, or things like that. So I mean, it's all these weird other things, and then you've got, I don't know, a lot of the categories just seem to be just out of whack completely. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, like I'm going to look it up now, because here's the thing, I for the longest time was using an iPhone, and I was using iTunes, but like I didn't use iTunes itself. I did everything within the phone itself, so I never even really looked at charts. Like, I have my list of people that I listen to that I've been listening to for years, and occasionally I'll drop one or come back to it in a year or two, sort of thing. But like, I've got my staples, and it's like, there is a point where, I have maybe subscribed to 20 podcasts total in a month, maybe, and I still, like, I'll download most of them, even if I don't listen to all of them, because I want that to be counted for some people. But like, other people will skip them entirely. There are certain episodes I'll skip, but if you have listened to more than 10 to 15 shows in a month, you really don't have time to listen to everything.
No,
like, especially with more and more podcasts going like daily. Like, we're trying to get probably 1 to 3 episodes a week out, just so that it you can choose what you want to listen to or not. But like there are many shows now that are like Joe Rogan, where it's like, oh, that's 9 hours a week just for his show.
Yeah, and it's like I used to work for Glenn Beck, and he does 9 hours. And actually, he does 3 hours every day, like Monday through Friday. And then he releases the same thing on a podcast.
And I mean, with him, you'll have, and people like him, you'll have a listener base that maybe only listens to his show, and that's it. They listen to nothing else. So you'll have, when you get a certain size, you can have an audience like that literally only listens to you.
Which I don't know if it's really worth that.
It used to be back in the satellite radio days, but like the problem is a lot of these hosts are treating it like satellite radio when it's not. So what's top shows? Top shows. Now, is this only going to show me Canada?
Yours will.
Okay.
Mine will show me
the number one
America,
show in Canada is Zane and Heath Unfiltered. Then Party Lines, Uncover, which is a CBC Canadian. The number 2 and 3 are Canadian CBC broadcast ones. I guarantee you nobody's listening to those. That's being paid for. I mean, that's public television. That's being paid for. Then Joe Rogan's number 4. Call Her Daddy. Barstool Sports is number 5. The Daily, which is the New York Times summary, is number 6. Okay, that makes sense. It's summary of the news. TED Talks Daily, The Clearing, something, Spittin' Service, Barstool Sports, Crime Junkie. I haven't heard of any of these. The Social. Okay, number 16, The Social. You know what The Social is? It's the Canadian version. It's the Canadian View. It's basically the Canadian View that they couldn't get any. They're a bunch of. It's a bunch of women cackling over stupid crap on CTV that my grandma watches every morning. And they have apparently a show, because here's a question: what 80-year-old women are listening to this on podcast form?
Nobody.
For it to make it number 16 on the list of all.
It's probably the same people that watch The View.
Okay, yeah. Okay, number 19 on the list is Canadian true crime, and it's true crime documentaries talking about it. That's cool. I understand why that's there. That's something that people like to listen to on their commuter before bed. Like it's the whole interesting. Apple Keynotes is number 22. There's a lot of CBC stuff here that's in the top list, and it doesn't make sense to me because I know that there is a big push for it. I'm wondering, I don't know, like there's not a lot. Like CBC produces really good dramas and really good documentaries. They're like, what if you mixed that's a good example. It's like, what if you mixed HBO with a national broadcaster at the same time? That's sort of what they do. Or like the BBC in the UK. There's other stuff here that I don't know. Like literally out of the top 50, I've heard of maybe 5. One of them is Dr. Death. That was popular from Worderly, where it's a documentary about the doctor that killed a whole bunch of patients and got away with it.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Phil. What else do we have here?
So you want to know? You want to know?
Okay,
something?
number 46 is Bill Burr. Makes sense. Okay, comedy podcast. He does it. Every week. He's really popular. I saw him live here. Funny. And then again, a whole bunch of nobodies, and then it looks like I can break it down based on category, which I'll do while you tell me what you're going to say.
So I was going to say that. So under and this is why I think it'd be funny to try just to see how this works, because the whole Apple system is a joke. How they lay out iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Because I'm under, and this is a gripe I had a few weeks ago because it shouldn't be here, but it's a flaw in their system. So under podcasts, religion and spirituality, longest running shows under that category. Guess what's number 8? You'll never guess it.
Well, let me see. I'll tell you what number 8 is in Canada. Rhythms
under religion and spirituality.
Yes, rhythms for life with looks like reverend and somebody. And then if I go forward, there's like a Christian storytelling one, meditation minis. Another one's like yoga. Bible Project is number 3. Number 1 is Oprah's Super Soul Conversations.
Weird. Oprah's not even on this one. Yeah, so the number 8 show, Smodcast.
Okay, let me look, see if it's in mine anywhere.
And guess what is number 26? Fat Man Beyond.
Okay.
Neither one of them fit under spirituality and religion. But yet they're here, and they're in the top 25.
It's not... None of that is listed under mine. Also, we don't have nearly as many categories.
Maybe they didn't roll it out for everybody.
So everything does look proper. It looks like there's like Muslim ones, there's Jewish ones, there's spiritual. It actually looks pretty. Jesus Calling, Stories of Faith. There's a lot on here. But let me scroll up and see. I'll tell you the categories we have, because I clicked on store, and then I clicked on top, and then I clicked on categories. So I'll see what there is. So we got news, comedy, sports, history, true crime, society and culture, arts, business, education, fiction, government. God, that would be boring. But that's probably also all like the political commentators. Health and fitness, kids and family, leisure, music, religion and spirituality, science, technology, TV and film. And that's it. I think those are the old categories.
Yeah, we got the new ones here.
So I know that they've rolled it out up here, because I know that I had to select new ones from like the iTunes Podcast Connect.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just so sick of the whole iTunes thing of how it breaks down information.
It seems like they didn't change much in the last 10 years. Like, it was really popular for about 6 years, and then they just did nothing with it. Well, it's basically when they stopped caring about the iPod.
You mean when Steve Jobs died?
Yeah. Because
That's
now
when they stopped it.
I'm just logging into the feed. And I just wanted to see what our categories are listed under, because I couldn't remember.
Yeah, because like the top. What's funny is all the stuff by like Studio 71 is garbage.
I'm trying to see where it tells me what categories I'm under.
Well, if you're on Spreaker, all you have to do is go into the show, the individual show, and do RSS feed customization.
Because it's just kind of, it's so convoluted. Just getting things posted there. At least with Spreaker or these platforms, they'll actually push things out to iTunes as an extra thing. Like, iTunes used to be the be all end all, and now it's just an extra.
Oh, I know. What's funny is we get more traffic from Spotify than we do iTunes now.
We don't. Let me see where we get ours from. But first, actually, let's see the feed.
And see, this is the sad thing, is they have a thing called featured providers on the homepage of the store now.
Oh, yeah.
So like Washington Post, NPR, Comedy Central, Vox Media, iHeartRadio, The Ringer, Podcast One, New York Times, Wondery, The Economist, Night Vale, Forever Dog, Slate,
Okay.
Bloomberg, Entertainment Weekly, Twit, ABC News, ESPN, CNN, Wall Street Journal, Audio Boom, Campfire, The New Yorker, and Starburns Audio. So like basically anything under those flags should not be anywhere in the whole lineup.
This is okay. I remember now. I was torn here because the 3 categories we have for iTunes now, we're listed under entertainment news, video games, and film reviews. Because we do all those, but we also do a lot of tech news. But tech news and entertainment news are considered 2 different categories.
So you just do the master one, news.
You'll never get anywhere with that.
I know.
So that's what we've got there. But like, I'm gonna see what the breakdown is because I know I was surprised like that of how many platforms it pushes out to. Like I now that I've got the Pixel, I'm using the Google podcast app. It is not nearly as good as running. The like one thing I will give Apple is their podcast app. Stop talking to me. I pressed the button and now it's talking to me.
You're like, go away, stop.
Go away, assistant. But anyway, it's not nearly as good. The iTunes the podcast app is fantastic. Like on like on the iPod and on the iPhone, it is by far the absolute best way to listen on mobile. Like period. There's nothing that comes close to it, and it's the one thing that they've kept strong, even if everything else about them is falling apart. It's the one thing that Google and Android just haven't been able to do is make a good podcast app. Because like I've got the Spreaker app on my phone as well, and it's way better than the built-in podcast app.
Oh yeah, that's because Google's is not a dedicated app.
But that's the thing. Like you have to download it separately, even though it's made by them, and it uses a few APIs and interfaces. Yet, for instance, if you close the app, by swiping up to close all your apps, it will not stop the audio. You have to do it manually.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let me see here. The breakdown of we've got. Where's that button here? Sources, right? Or are we looking at sources? So our media breakup is 39% is Apple Core Media iPhones. Then generic Android app is 14%. Chrome is 10%. So that would be people just, I guess, listening on the website.
Yep.
iTunes, the program itself is 10%. iPods, is 5%. Somebody's using the Opera browser, and that's 5%.
It's Mike.
Probably. iPads is 5%. Somebody listens, or 3% of people do Apple Watches. I don't know what Overcast is. Podcast Addict, Google Podcasts is 0.3%. Then we don't have any listeners on Spotify, like at all, which is surprising because I know it pushes out to, oh, wait a minute. Somebody else has, that's right. Somebody else has This Week in Geek on there. And they haven't had a podcast in 2 years. And I contacted, 3 years. And I contacted Spotify to say, hey, this is a non-existent thing. We're an existing brand that's been using this name for 12 years. And then I was waiting for them to determine whether or not we should be allowed to be using this name without anything else in there. Because the classic feed that I created works on there because it has the word classic in it, whereas just plain This Week in Geek will not work on there. Which is really, like, that's the thing that pisses me off. If you have not had a podcast in 3 years, you should be removed. But yeah, it's just crazy to me, like how at least now we can break down and see what everybody's actually like listening to us on. But it is funny that you guys have more people on Spotify, and then we still have like a lot of iPhone users.
Yeah, and they were saying that it was kind of weird that we had that problem.
Let's see here.
I noticed on your regular This Week in Geek feed that everything is double.
That happened. Something weird happened, and it was actually to do with Blog Talk, and it was put in some sort of weird feed loop where it doubled the feed up, and I had to go in and be like, stop. And it happened like it shouldn't be doing it anymore, but it happened like one day where I was like, Birdman goes, hey, is something wrong with the feed? And I'm like, why? He's like, I think I'm seeing double.
Yeah, as of the August 31st, that's when it stopped happening.
Okay. And the other issue is there, like I've noticed that there's I I think I have to go into the website and change the feed on there because it's pulling the feed from a couple sources. Because I think the actual feed from the website, if you click subscribe through the RSS feed on the website, I don't think it's pulling from the same source. And there's a couple issues where it's when you got a feed this old, I think it's pulling from a few different places. Because when I searched This Week in Geek like through Google Podcasts, it found two different feeds of This Week in Geek, one with the current artwork, one with different artwork, and it's the same content.
Well, I can tell you where part of that is, and that's because the website is set up to be more or less the distribution hub. And yeah, so yeah, that was the original setup. So
yeah, it's time for some change.
And it's got the current logo. That's the funny thing, and the one that's on the RSS feed does not. The website has the current one.
Oh, okay.
Like the current design and everything. So it's actually kind of funny because I don't think it's actually pulling from that anymore. So
okay, so for the classic feed, we got to get this working with Spotify because the classic feed, which has like minuscule downloads compared because it's all like reposts of the interviews and stuff, that is 67% Spotify. And then everything else tapers off to nothing. So if we could get the main feed working on Spotify, it would probably it's looking like it would double or triple our listeners. Maybe I'm just gonna have to put the main show on. I'm just gonna have to double up the show. If they're unwilling at Spotify to say, hey, these guys were. First of all, that podcast that stopped 3 years ago is just a copycat of ours. And the president of us working is like, we were operating like 6 years before them and 3 years after they ended.
There's one called This Week in Geek by the Southgate Media Group in America. And it stopped producing content a year ago. And
I know Birdman said he used to get emails every now and then. He would get an email from somebody saying, hey, you're using our name, stop using us. And he was like, correction, we've been running like 10 years longer than you. Like some people try to pull the thing of like, you're pulling us. And then we've actually had people tweet at us like, it was great being a guest on This Week in Geek, and it's like that's nice, but who are you? We haven't had somebody who's like, we do this. I was a tabletop gamer. It's like, oh, I had a great interview. I was on This Week in Geek, because they don't have the Twitter handle because we've had the Twitter handle since 2008. Yeah, but somebody will think it's us, and I have a form letter I use now, where I go. Where basically I'll tweet back at them and be like, "Oh, sorry, I think you got us confused with what did I say? With a copycat of ours, but we do the same sort of interviews, and we've been out this long, and with 1,300 episodes, and if you'd like, come check us out." And smiley face, and it'll be like a passive aggressive thing at the people that not at the person who like was interviewed, but the people that are pretending to be Twig. Mm-hmm. And if their argument is, if they're like, "Oh, it's not the case. We never heard you," bull BS, because you use the name and you're marketing yourselves as the same thing. And the time that you would have signed up, you would have been looking for that Twitter handle. You would have been looking for that web domain, and you would have been like, "Oh crap, somebody else is there." And you're just like, "Well, we'll just hope we'll get bigger and get to the point where we can claim that we were there first." And you get a lot of people that do that with other podcasts too. And it's like, they don't realize how copyright works. That you don't even have to file it. You just have to provide proof that you were there first. And the proof's in the pudding. Where it's like, what? Oh, would you like to see domain receipts for going
episode
back? 1? Would you like? First of all, would you like to see content? Would you like to see episode 1? Would you like to see our interviews that we did 7 years before you existed? would you like to see the receipt from our web domain that we've been paying for 13 years?
We had somebody do that with remote control, the telecast, a couple of other shows that we did.
With the
Geekcast
telecast,
Radio.
let them take it, because I've been waiting for episodes for like years now. So let somebody else do it.
Yeah.
But you had people try to say claim your domain or claim your content or something.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, like the World Wide Web is a big place, but the name of your program and the type of content that you do and we do is unique enough that you would have to know we exist before you start something.
Yeah.
Like it's not like we're an upstart with no media presence. Like, you know, people in the industry, people in radio, people in television, people in video games, they know who we are. If by even though we're not like an IGN level or anything, we're not even, you know, we're not close to anything that, but we're known within the industry enough, more so than those podcasts are that are starting up. So what pisses Mike off and pisses me off is like the gall for you to pretend that you didn't know and then try to get something out of us. Or they've had people contact the feedback email, like speaking of .net saying, "Oh, we've got the .com available for sale, $10,000." F off. Like thisweekingeek.net has been, you know, that domain forever. If we acquired the .com, we wouldn't even use it as the main thing. We'd use it as a redirect, because .net is like, it's the brand at this point. But people think,
no, that's kind of where it's at.
There would be no point. Like that would be like you guys, like if you acquired, you know, 12 different domain, you know, names or domain, you know, endings, you would just use them as redirects to your main site anyway. So it's like, we're not giving you $10,000 for the name that we already have. That the .com means nothing. You know, when the .net domain that we've been using is what gets us traffic.
Yeah, I don't know. It's getting a little crazy out there with a lot of the copycats and everything else going on.
Like I almost, you know, thought as a joke I was gonna start a GCRN rival website. I just pretend to be somebody completely different, anonymize it, and just see how far I could get before I saw you and or Blanchard, more likely Blanchard, throw a conniption fit over it.
Are you kidding? Blanchard wouldn't even notice.
He wouldn't.
I would notice before he would.
He wouldn't even notice until I called, like, it's like with the hosts, Dave TFG2 Cranford or something. Make it a full parody, and he probably wouldn't even be able to tell.
Well, like I had somebody. Oh, that's what it was. Somebody tried to steal All Things Transformers. Really? And I'm like, I've been around since 2008, buddy. Sorry.
Well, they tried to claim your content, or tried to like or
website name.
Have you had
podcast name?
Oh, they like just like tried to sign up for it, or tried to claim that you took it from them or something.
Well, they just took the social handles and everything else and all this other, you know, like just purposely trying to.
Well, you haven't had the case where like they've downloaded your episodes and then tried to pass them off as their own yet?
I've had that happen before with a couple of shows, specifically M-Wire, and I'm like, more power to you, except for the fact that if you'll get hit with copyright before I will. But
not to mention that in your show, all the links would be towards you, like in the audio. They'd have to cut that out. It would make no sense, because it would all be redirecting to you in the first place. But yeah, and I've heard of people having that happen. Like, it's a different thing where, like, if we share a show and, you know, we have a few of them where we syndicate it a few days later. It's like, because you're in a partnership on a show. That's different than what I was talking about. Is like when somebody goes and is like, we're just going to data mine your entire content archive and try to find a way to monetize it somewhere else. And it's like that. People do that with YouTube all the time. Like, they'll take somebody's podcast, like Rogan was a big one, where they'll take their content and then just, you know, flip the image to reverse it so it doesn't hit the algorithm, and then or pitch the audio up and down, and then try to get like a couple 100,000 views for posting a podcast. So it's the bots are getting smarter or the algorithms are getting smarter at finding these sorts of things. And I don't think it happens quite as much with podcasts, but I think if you were somebody that had a massive following, you'd have a lot more of that happening, where somebody's like trying to find a way to take your feed. But now that like Spreaker and all these content platforms push your content to multiple things like iHeartRadio and everything, I think it's a lot less likely for these sorts of things to happen. Except in the case where somebody was on Spotify before we were with the same name. And it's the exact same name. That's why I wouldn't accept it when we tried to push it through. Because if I pull them up, that's what's infuriating. And what's more infuriating is it's like if they had a better sounding podcast, it'd be cool. When your podcast sounds like crap, it's like, oh, you're dragging our name down.
Oh yeah, totally. I totally can relate to that. But I think that about wraps up this conversation, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not even the topic we were going to be talking about.
No, but it kind of ran its own course. So
I guess we got this out of our system, and then should we give a teaser what the topic was going to be? And
totally.
So
yeah, next week I'll let you intro it since it was your idea originally.
Sure. So I'm going to set the stage here. We had a private discussion. We're like, what are we going to talk about? We've got a few ideas floating around, and I said, okay. I had recently watched a few weird ads pop up, like old commercials on YouTube, and I was like, you know what? Advertising for children and kids and adolescents now, which I don't see a whole ton of because I don't really keep regular TV, but from what I do see is dramatically different from everything pre-2000. And it was going to be an interesting topic of how advertising and like for toys, for food, for everything has changed how they market to kids over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that could sort of parlay into other topics later on. Like, especially the 90s seemed to be the peak. Like, 80s had a lot of ads for kids, but I think the 90s is where, like, they really made the push for children's like advertising, and then the dramatic changes happened shortly after. So that was my idea for the topic that we were going to talk about before it was all about, podcasting landscapes.
Totally. So until next time, we've been
Alex.
And I've been Steve. And so you can get a hold of us on the social medias at
This Week in Geek. I'm pretty much anywhere. At this point, I should probably make a little recording that we pop in here with everything, because you can contact us so many different ways. Alex at thisweekingeek.net, feedback at thisweekingeek.net, Twitter. You can get a hold of me, Deathface Swig, or just This Week in Geek.
And you can get a hold of me on geekcastradio.com or at Altered Geek or at SCP21. So until next time, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks.